Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. This Thursday, August 22nd edition of the RTI Press Pass. Tennessee football opens the season in 9 days, ladies and gentlemen. We are almost there, less than 10 days away, and college football officially starts in 2 days. So the excitement is real. I know the excitement is real here on Rocky Top. I got Ryan Schumpert and Ric Butler with me, who have been grinding fall camp as they have been for the last couple of weeks. Rick, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think that this time of the month, it can really be considered as the calm before the storm, not only with Tennessee and kind of what they're ramping down with fall camp, what they're kind of ramping up with the game week next week, but it's also kind of the calm before the storm for myself. I'm now, Ryan, I don't know about you, but I'm now starting to feel the last 3 weeks of just, the consistently waking up early for practice and have a little bit more to do on the plate. So I actually am feeling a little bit tired here as we sit here on August 22nd or whatever it is, but only room to grow as a very highly anticipated season is about to unfold. So still a lot to get into, but I'm sure we'll get it all down today, and it's good to be with you guys.
Ryan, what's your excitement level for Florida State, Georgia Tech in Dublin on Saturday?
Well, I would have started it at a 7. That would have been my initial ranking as a 7, because I do think it'll be a pretty decent game.
Yeah.
It is down to a 6 because I think I'm going to go to Hoops for Hope on Saturday, which is like an hour. I believe that game, Hoops for Hope, is at 11, and then the Florida State Georgia Tech game is at 12. And I imagine I'll probably do some work after Hoops for Hope. So now that I'm not going to be able to watch probably the first half, my excitement level is down to a 6. But I'd say a good week 0 game. Not a great week 0 game, but a good week 0 game.
I just wish DJ Uiagalelei wasn't the first quarterback I see play for the college football season. It's probably the most boring quarterback to watch play. But yes, I'm very excited for Georgia Tech. I'm not that excited for Florida State. I hope they don't dominate because it could happen. They have great defense, but I'm definitely rooting for Georgia Tech, and I think an upset could happen, and they're feisty this year. So I'm intrigued for sure. 8.5 out on a scale 1 to 10 in my excitement level. I'll say that.
Everybody is all on Georgia Tech on the line, which makes me think Florida State's going to have to be the play.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It feels like a little bit of false hope, right? Where everybody's just backing the underdog because the first game, like, oh, better watch out,
Yeah.
Georgia Tech has that little glimmer of hope of being like I said, a feisty, competitive team in the ACC this year. But in all reality, they'll probably get stomped. So
I'll be honest, I didn't hear a single word after once you said DJ's last name. You said it so well, it caught me off guard. I didn't think you were going to get it that well. You kind of nailed it. And from that moment on, for the last 30 seconds, I've just been like, wow, I wonder if I could do that.
All right. So obviously, we've been saying Nico Iamaleava for years now, but what is the harder name, you think? Like if you went in blind to both last names, what do you think's harder?
I mean, my gut says DJ.
Feels like it has more consonants, which I feel like is a problem.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not even sure I have Nico's name down correctly at this point. It's been 3 years, so
say it.
Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, no, that's
the
Ama.
Yeah. The Ama is where I think I don't actually know where to put the accent, but you're saying it for all intents and purposes correctly.
I know I'm in the ballpark. Like it's
right,
exactly. Not bad, but I don't know if I have it like 100% correct.
It's like either Iamaleava or Iamaleava. It's like with the accent there in the middle part, I think is where everybody differs. And I don't really know the correct answer, to be honest with you. I know I've heard it said correctly, but I can't remember. So,
well, you'll hear it said a lot more wrong than you probably will right over the next 4 or 5 months.
I've heard
it's going to be fun to kind of collect them.
I've heard some good Iamaleava and Iamaleavas out there. So
the Iamaleava is by far the most. That one feels by far the most common. Iamaleava, because that's how you would sound it out if you were just going syllables at a time. So it's going to be fun to see how people butcher it. Starting with Reese Davis in the College Football 25 video game, but it's a tough name. I mean, so like I don't even discredit them that much, but no, there are going to be some epic failures on television this year.
Don't think it'll ever happen, of course, but if Nico were to ever enter the transfer portal, it'd be it'd be funny to change his last name to I'm Aliva because he's leaving. Nah, funny
the joke writes itself, Jack. That's a good
That's
one.
right. That's right. Hey, we're all comedians here, right? Now let's not quit our day jobs there. Anyway, today we got a fun show planned for you guys. We're gonna get into some bold predictions. We're going to do one thing for each person that excites us and worries us about this Tennessee Volunteers team here in 2024. Right before we get into that, as we've been doing the last couple of weeks, fall camp probably slowed down a little bit here in the last week, but today you guys did meet with Joey Halsley, Nico, a couple of receivers. Anything that stood out to you in the last week as you've been over there on campus covering fall camp?
I think the big thing was on Monday. Josh Heupel kind of probably basically said that Cam Seldon's been cleared for contact.
Kind of basically. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't very, there wasn't a whole lot of conviction behind it. He kind of muttered, yeah, as he walked off the stage, as he was kind of refusing to answer the question. I took what he said as, yeah. I'm not sure I fully believe him / fully believe that means we're going to see him game 1 against Chattanooga, given the nature of the game and given how I think Tennessee's running back room has developed pretty well. But overall, I think that was still a positive update, no matter to what scale it is accurate. And that probably means he should be available at least by North Carolina State, if not by Chattanooga. He could very well play some against Chattanooga. So that seems like a good sign. That's a guy that it felt like he could miss a couple weeks early in the season. And I will say I feel a lot better now than I did entering fall camp about what Tennessee has behind both Dylan Sampson and Cam Seldon at running back. But I would say that's the big thing this week. Joey Halsley was generally interesting, I would say today, Rick, but nothing that just was super eventful or super stood out about what he said.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think he went over a lot of things that you'd probably expect with about a week or so to go for the season. How are guys meshing together? How is Tennessee going to, try to improve in the run game? What does the tempo look like with Nico Iamaleava at the quarterback position? So it was, and I even had a thought today that just Joey Halsley, to me, he's a very, very good speaker, but he knows how to kind of get these answers out in a very correct way. He's not going to make any kind of storylines. Not that any Tennessee coach really does so in general, but he kind of just gets to his point and then gets out. So I think today it was a good opportunity to talk to Nico, to talk to Brew McCoy, to talk to Dante Thornton, just kind of see where those guys are. And my takeaway was that there is confidence between those three guys. There is confidence among the guys who are going to be in this offense. I think they like what each other can do on the field. I think that they believe they have a deeper offense. That was one of the things that Brew McCoy actually touched on. He said, back in that 2022 season, we had a lot of tread in our tires, right? Or we had a lot of miles on our tires. We were moving a lot. We were playing a lot in these games. And so I think just to have a little bit more depth is something that excites this offense. And then again, that's something that Joey Halsley talked about as well. Just being able to put those seasons out. He talked about it as, man, we look at the season as a 17-game schedule, right? We want to be where our goals are at the end of the year. And so we need to kind of go through that system. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. Do I still kind of expect Tennessee to rotate more than what they've done in the past? I don't know yet. I think they have more pieces too, but ultimately we'll just have to see when they get out on the field. But I think there is certainly a level of comfort that there is more depth across the offense.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump in. Bold prediction time. It's time to get bold here on the Press Pass. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. What's your first bold prediction for the Tennessee season here?
My first bold prediction is that Ethan Davis will finish second on Tennessee's team in receiving touchdowns. It kind of goes twofold. 2021, ironically, was the year where Tennessee had a lot of balance. Seven touchdowns from Velus Jones Jr. would have been the second most touchdowns for Tennessee that year. And I believe it's been 5 and 4 in 2022 in this past year. So 6 is kind of the number that I look at. And in fact, Nico, who talked to us today, talked about not Ethan Davis in particular, but the tight end room and how much he likes, or what a weapon those guys are to use in the red zone. We've seen Tennessee throw to tight ends in the red zone a good bit. I think Ethan Davis has a little bit more burst of athleticism that could allow him to make some more, maybe not 40, 50 yard chunk plays, but 20 to 30 yard chunk play touchdowns. Like I was watching back the highlights of the Pitt game from 2 years ago earlier this week, and I forgot about the play Tennessee, kind of the play action pass and the snuck Jacob Warren out through the middle, and he kind of got hawked down at the 1 yard line, and that's a play I think Ethan Davis with his athleticism would score on. So with what he brings, with the way Tennessee likes to throw to the tight ends in the red zone, I like that. And then I think maybe most importantly, it's kind of the depth at receiver room. And to me, again, one of the big questions is who steps up, who becomes the true wide receiver one, or is there a bunch of separation? And while I think it's very possible that one receiver could step up and have a really big season, I don't think we're going to see it where it's like two guys to get double-digit touchdown receptions at receiver. So I could see it being a bunch of guys have a minimal to moderate amount of touchdowns on this Tennessee team, 2 to 4 touchdowns on this Tennessee team. And I think that could potentially set Ethan Davis up to have a really good season and be second on Tennessee's team in touchdowns.
No, I like it a lot. And we've talked about a lot on here that, this is probably the most talented tight end group Tennessee's had in the Heupel era as far as, receiving upside with Holden Stays and certainly Ethan Davis, which is the strength of his game. And, just tight ends in general, Tennessee's incorporated tight ends a lot in the red zone and near the end zone. And, McAllen Castles was second on the team last year, right? In touchdowns with 5. So it's a part of Tennessee's offense. It's a part of Heupel's offense are the tight ends near the end zone. So Ethan Davis finishing second, I think, is very possible. It's just, I think to do that, he's going to have to, for sure, be a top 2 tight end on Tennessee's team and not be the third string. I don't know if there's technically strings with this group of 3. I think they'll all play together, but he's going to have to probably get more snaps than at least one of those 3. And I feel like that's a likelihood at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing that'll be interesting here is just like big play touchdowns. Tennessee didn't really have many of those in the passing game last year. And obviously that really was a staple both in 22 and 21. And those aren't really, we haven't seen those go to tight ends much. So that would kind of be, I think, one of the concerns / just like you said, the fact that there are a lot of bodies at that spot. And it's not like we see Tennessee just like substitute a lot in the middle of drives. So, how it falls, it's kind of like in a fantasy position. It's like having a running back that's, going to be pretty even on the snaps. You kind of risk it. And a lot of times it may not break your way where they get a lot of touches in the red zone. So that would kind of be one of the concerns for me. But I could see it happening. I think he's going to be at least one of Tennessee's better red zone weapons.
To your point, though, I mean, I think that, Ethan Davis, I think I might have said this on the podcast last week. If I did, I apologize. But I looked at Ryan when he was up at the podium about a week or so ago, and I just said, guy looks like he's 30 years old, right? He doesn't look like a player who is waiting to emerge onto the college football scene. And looks are one thing, plays another, but he seems like the type of player that's going to be able to elevate himself up to what he needs. And I just think that a guy's a mismatch machine. I think he's got freaky athleticism. I think more than we've probably seen. I think he's a mismatch machine. And I believe that, this Tennessee coaching staff, Joey Halzle, Josh Heupel, I believe that they can create some opportunities for him. So I think that's a fair, bold prediction. I think that, again, Ethan Davis, a mismatch machine. I wonder how they're going to be using him this fall.
Rick, you want to keep us going here with one of your 2 bold predictions?
Yeah, well, first off, I was thinking about, what my bold predictions were going to be. I was going through a couple, and some of them I started to honestly contradict myself with it, right? I wanted to maybe kind of put Nico Iamaleava in that Heisman category. I think that would be a bold prediction, but that would sort of contradict my thought last week that I do think that Tennessee is going to go 9-3. And so I'm holding that. So I actually think that there's a couple of different ways that it's challenging to find bold prediction for this team. There are certainly newcomers, but there are also some expectations with this team. I think, Ryan made a good kind of statistic thought there. I'm going to go with more of just a concept idea. I really think that Tennessee is going to get back up to the number 1 pace offense in the country. There aren't a ton of, I guess there's not a ton of evidence I have for that besides going back to, I did feel like they had a much quicker tempo to them when they played Iowa last year. We'll see how Josh Heupel and Nico have kind of worked through that over the offseason. But I think that this Heupel and Halzle offense, it clearly wants to operate fast. It was very efficient when it was operating fast last year. And there's so many examples of being able to keep defenses on their heels, what that can do for an offense that's trying to make their way down the field quickly. I think that Nico Iamaleava is the type of quarterback who can get Tennessee back up to that offense. I think he's not only got it with the play on the field, but I think he's got it mentally as well. Now, it might take a couple climbs to get there, right? You might not see some of that top tier level orchestration of the offense until maybe later in the season. But I do think that at some point, Tennessee does get back up to one of, if not a top 3 tempo offense in the country. I just think that that's what they want to do. I don't think that they were able to go as fast as they maybe wanted to last year. And I think that Nico is the kind of guy who can get them back into that left lane when it comes into the offenses of college football.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, Nico playing the Citrus Bowl, that's all we really have to go off of when we're forecasting this season and how Nico will do. It's obviously the most important playing time he's got in a Tennessee uniform. And, I think you look at the stats and you see 4 total touchdowns and you see a 35-0 win over one of the best defenses in college football last year. It's easy to really buy into Nico when you're just looking at the box score. I think, I'm saying his performance in that game was maybe a little bit less than what people are making it out to be just because of the touchdown total and the fact that his rushing touchdowns were a little bit fluky, a little bit. Like, I don't think that's going to be what Nico does for Tennessee. He's not going to be a 3 rushing touchdown. That's an anomaly, I think. I don't know if that'll even happen this year. But what I loved about Nico in that game was how comfortable he looked in the Heupel offense and how the pace improved. It was a complete 180 from what we saw from Joe Milton last year. And that to me was the best takeaway from that game. And I don't want to give Nico, I don't want to sour on that game too much. He played a great game for all intents and purposes, and he was running for his life a lot of times, given the O-line injuries. But I do think the pace that you saw against Iowa and how comfortable Nico looked was the best thing about that game offensively.
Yeah, and clearly it's something that we believe that has been working through this year. And maybe as I think about it a little bit more, and as you started talking there, maybe I think a fair prediction is that Tennessee gets back up to a top 5 tempo in the country. I can't exactly remember where they finished last year, but we all saw it. We all talked about it. There were times where it felt like Tennessee's desire to go fast, but they didn't really have the ability to play fast. It kind of created a weird juxtaposition. I guess my bold prediction was that Tennessee gets up to the number 1 tempo in the country this year. So I think a fair one is that Tennessee elevates itself. A bold prediction is that Tennessee leads the nation in that category. And again, just from what we've seen, that's when Tennessee's offense works its best and most efficiently. So that's kind of what one of my more broad concept thoughts going into the season is. I think that Tennessee will get back up to a really high number. And as a bold prediction, I'll say leading the country.
Yeah, I think that's where the importance of Cooper Mays staying healthy is big too. I mean, I think that was not that the tempo was just way better or anything when he was back, but I think you saw from the start that was an issue as he was hurt the first month of the season. And Jack, kind of going back to, it's off the topic a little bit, but your point about Nico in the Citrus Bowl. I mean, to me, almost the most encouraging thing about that game, and you used the word comfort, and I think that's kind of what this is too, is you going into that game. I remember saying this. I was horrible on offense. I mean, terrible on offense. Really, the key for Tennessee to win that game was for Nico to not put the ball in harm's way, to not turn it over, to take care of the ball, to make Iowa earn all the points that they were going to get in that game. And he didn't put a ball in harm's way all game. So while, yes, I think the touchdowns were probably a little, like you said, a little bit of an anomaly. And obviously one of those touchdowns, Tennessee scores 35 points. They get a pick 6. They get a strip sack and start a drive at the 1 yard line. And Nico didn't throw for a ton of yards. I think just the fact that he didn't force things and he made the plays that were out in front of him in a game where, again, like you said, he was kind of running for his life a lot, was a pretty encouraging sign.
And to kind of follow up on that even, I mean, you're looking at Tennessee and you've got 4 returning guys, depending on who wins that left guard spot. We'll see how Lance Hurd factors in as well. But again, you have a conditioned offensive line. You have guys who are seniors in this program who understand, what it takes to keep their body right through the course of a season. But they also understand what it's like to be a lineman in that fast-moving offense. I think maybe if there was a little bit more widespread turnover with Tennessee this year, maybe some more incoming transfers that were projected to start, maybe besides Lance, maybe that might be a little bit of a, okay, well, let's see how that unfolds. But I think you look at those 4 returning guys with the addition of Lance and you say, okay, that seems like an offensive line that knows how to get up and move down the field. So I think there's a couple of things that kind of go in that direction.
Yeah. My first bold prediction, both of them will kind of go hand in hand, but the first one is that Tennessee is once again a top 5 offense in college football. And I don't know if I feel like this is bold enough. I was a little bit wishy-washy on if it's bold enough, but I do.
That was my fear, so I'm with you.
37th last year, of course, first and 22. I just look, and especially in the SEC, I would say they're top 3 minimum in the SEC. I just think the upside with Nico, the receiver group would have to hit. 2 guys would at least have to step up and become real difference makers for this to happen. The O-line has to stay healthy, which is probably the most important thing about this. The O-line doesn't stay healthy. Tennessee's not going to have a top 5 offense. And then, someone else other than Dylan Sampson is going to have to pose a threat offensively, which I think will happen. So top 5 offense for Tennessee. Nico is as advertised. I've really bought into Nico the more I've thought about this season. And watching his press conferences, take away from that what you will, but he just looks like he's going to be a really good leader for this Tennessee offense. And that's really encouraging. And as long as the receiver group hits, which I'm going to touch on them a little bit later as well, I think that's a big component to this. And the O-line stays healthy, Tennessee will have a top 5 offense. Bold prediction number 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big question, I think, for this team. I think when we talk about Tennessee making the playoff, or like we, did the schedule predictions last week, and Jack and I both had them going 10-2. That's kind of the prerequisite that you just assume is going to happen. Maybe not top 5, but the offense is going to be a lot better. And last year was just an anomaly. And I think we kind of all talk about it, or at least think about it, like last year was an anomaly, and this offense is going to at least be closer to what they were in 22 than what they were last year. So I think that has to happen. I think it will happen. And in that range, I mean, probably top 15 minimum, probably top 10, and certainly if they're top 5, that puts them in I do think that's bold, and that puts them in a spot where, all right, they probably are going 10-2, unless they just have some colossal defensive collapses and
right.
multiple big games.
Yeah, and to go along with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say they're 7th and 21. Maybe it's not bold enough, but I just feel like taking that step from last year is a little bit. I mean, it's 22 spot leap, right? That's what I said. So, maybe it's not bold enough, but top 5 for sure.
And I think one thing that goes into that and kind of works hand in hand with it is that it's not really, I don't want to make it as one of my bold predictions, but I think there's a sense of necessity that Tennessee's got to be more efficient in the red zone this year. Too many opportunities last year, too many trips to the red zone where you weren't getting the full number of points that you could have out of it. If Tennessee is better in that way, then I do think that, it goes into your point of Tennessee can start really climbing the ladder when it comes to nationwide offenses. But I think that, again, they've got to be better in the red zone. That was actually something that Josh Heupel sort of emphasized when he spoke to the media on Monday. So I think that they'll be better. I'm not going to make it a bold prediction, but I think that could be one of the crucial things. Obviously, I mean, we're talking about scoring points here, but being able to be more efficient in the red zone, being able to capitalize on those opportunities, I think that's one of the biggest differentiating factors between Tennessee being a little bit down where they were and then being up there in the top 5 like what you're predicting.
Yeah, Ryan. Hendon Hooker was hyper efficient in the red zone, especially inside the 10-5 2 years ago. That was such an underrated aspect of Hendon Hooker's game that I think was lost from last season. I feel like Nico will be certainly closer to Hendon than Joe, and Tennessee will make more red zone trips too.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the quote from Joey Halsey today that actually made me think about it. This is on Nico. He feels space, he feels timing, he understands what's going on innately. The kid gets football and he studies real hard. I thought the stuff about space and timing, made me think of Tennessee's 3rd and short struggles and red zone struggles, which some of it, was, all right, they just didn't line up and run the ball as well as they did in those situations in 2022. Some of that's probably an offensive line thing, not having Darnell right. But I still largely think a lot of that was about the quarterback play, and that Tennessee did not trust Joe Milton a lot in those short touch pass areas. I mean, I think of the play, I think it was against A&M. Tennessee went for it, kind of fringe field goal range in the first half on like a 4th and 1, 4th and 2, and he rolled out. He had 2 guys kind of semi-open, and he just held on to it way too late, and then essentially just threw an uncatchable ball.
I remember.
And it felt like teams were going to dare Tennessee to complete short passes in short yardage situations, whether that was a 3rd and goal or a 3rd and short, or whether that was in the red zone. And I just think that made it a lot harder for Tennessee to run. I think of Joe Milton's weaknesses, that was one of the bigger ones. And it's certainly somewhere I think Nico will be better. As good as Hendon Hooker, it's going to be tough because Hendon was so good at having to feel for when to run too. But an area that certainly Tennessee needs to be a lot better, and I think there's reasons to believe they will.
Two things on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Two things on that. Number one,
Dylan Sampson. Yeah.
Yes. Man, Hendon Hooker is still doing that in the NFL. Just thinking about what his highlights were from Detroit. I mean, when he pulled that touchdown just a day or two ago, Josh Dobbs did another similar thing. I can't remember the second point. And then just Ryan, you mentioned third down a second ago. I believe that Tennessee was 30th in the country in third down percentage on offense last season. It's not like a miserable place to be, but hey, Tennessee has expectations to be one of the 12 best teams in the country this year. That's got to rise too. So I think all those things, I mean, third and short, red zone efficiency, those are all going to be instrumental factors in Tennessee kind of potentially climbing up to that top 5 offense in the country. Like, I think we all believe that there's a possibility for it.
Ryan, before you give your second bold prediction, last thing I'll say about this is Dylan Sampson is one of the most touchdown efficient guys that was in the sport last year. I remember writing about it multiple times. His touchdown to touch ratio was insane. And he's always had a nose for the end zone. So him getting more reps down there too will help. I mean, he had 7 rushing touchdowns last year in a 3-headed monster backfield. So I think that's also an element to Tennessee's red zone upside too offensively.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. And I think that's an area, not the touchdown aspect of it, but the area I would look for just while we're on Dylan Sampson. I feel like we've talked so much about the guys behind him. We haven't talked about him. I mean, the big thing I would say for him this year is just, I think, his vision. How much better can his vision get? There were times last year I feel like he missed a hole or took, bad cuts. But obviously when he does get out in space, he's incredibly dynamic. Now that he is the lead guy and he's the guy that Tennessee's going to depend on a lot, not he's just going to be a bell cow, that consistency I think will be a big thing for him.
All right, Ryan, what's your second bold prediction?
Second bold prediction, Tennessee will have 15 plus interceptions defense, which would be the most of the Josh Heupel era. They've gone, I believe they went 13 interceptions in 2021, 11 in 2022, 12 last season. So I'll push it up a little bit. My first thought when I thought of it was just to go, all right, they'll have the most of the Heupel era, but since it's been such a log jam, I'll say they clear it by 2. And I think it's kind of twofold. The most important thing to me, or maybe threefold even, the most important thing to me is that Tennessee's pass rush, I think, will put teams in situations where quarterbacks are maybe making rushed or poor decisions. I think that's the thing that I feel most confident in. I think the thing that I feel second most confident in, or I at least would point to, Tennessee plays a lot of young quarterbacks, or just a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks. I mean, obviously Jalen Milroe and Carson Beck, kind of the two guys that the hardest games, are very experienced. You don't necessarily expect them to throw a lot of interceptions, but heck, the third hardest game, I think we all think on the schedule, Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold's a first-time starter. I know that there's been some of the practice reports out of Oklahoma is that he's been a little turnover prone. And then when you look at the rest of the schedule with an Arkansas, a Vanderbilt, a Mississippi State,
Kentucky.
Those are all Kentucky. That's the other one I was thinking of. All first-time starters, at least in the SEC. I know the Arkansas kid started last year, but all first-time starters, and I think that could lead to more interceptions. And then lastly, more of maybe a hunch, a speculation, more than I feel super confident in this. But I do wonder when we talk about some of those young, talented guys at corner, or maybe Boo Carter getting opportunities, you just see a little bit more risk or a little bit more high-end talent. Maybe those young guys that leads to some more bust and big play touchdowns. Tennessee has not given up many of those. That's kind of been one of the things that we probably should give them more credit for in the secondary. But I wonder if that leads to some of those guys taking some more risk and being able to force some more turnovers.
Ryan, I know you've been pretty high on the corners, and you touched on it a little bit there, but in terms of the pecking order of your reasons why, you talk about young quarterbacks and just the other reasons you laid out, where would your confidence in the corners kind of rank on that? Is it more of situation and pass rush, as far as situation being who they're playing, or is it you're high on the corners?
Yeah, no, it's more, it's the order I just listed them in. With the pass rush one,
pass rush, and then quarterbacks face,
then the quarterbacks on the schedule. And it's not that, it's more that I still have like a thought. Concern probably isn't the right word. A thought that a lot of Tennessee's conservative nature in the defensive backfield is the way they've called games, as opposed to just having players that are maybe a little bit lower ceiling or aren't going to take a ton of risk. I think some of it is just Tennessee doesn't want to take a bunch of risk in the back end, and they're happy to play some bend don't break football at a lot of times. So I wonder how much that's the case, as opposed to it just being as simple as, all right, new corners in here that are more talented, they're going to take a lot more risk, they're going to play a lot more aggressive. That might be the case. I'm just not like positive in it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think on that as well, and sorry, I was looking away at something for my next pick, but there's so much athleticism in that secondary, and I believe that it's young athleticism. I believe that it's a bit inexperienced athleticism, but I'm excited to see what that athleticism manifests into. And if a guy like Boo Carter can really translate that athleticism and that freaky stuff that he can do on the field to being a playmaking, a ball hawking safety or star wherever he's at, I think that could be one of the things that kind of, again, if this comes true, trends in that direction. So there's a lot of athleticism between the secondary. A lot of it is a little bit unknown, but I'm excited to see what it could potentially manifest into.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intrigue with this corner group and secondary overall. It's the most intriguing it's been in the hype era just because of the turnover and the upside of it being better. And we'll touch on them more in a little bit. At least I know I will. But Rick, let's go ahead and get your second bold prediction here.
Well, my first question to you guys, is it more bold to pick Tennessee missing or making the playoffs? It would be making, right? That would be the more bold prediction out of the two.
I almost think it's a coin flip. So I almost think it's a coin flip. So I don't think either is bold. Honestly, that's my take.
I think it's more bold to say they make it, but I don't really think
I would give you a pass if you said home game, though. Home game or finish unranked. That's your only two options here.
No, I like that. It is going to be my honorable mention, though, that Tennessee misses the playoffs, because I am in the same boat. I don't really think it's too bold to say that. They're going to be on the cusp of it the whole year. Here's one that I go back and forth. If you catch me on 1 minute, I might feel really strong about it. If you catch me on another minute, I might be a little bit more hesitant. But do either one of you know who is currently Tennessee's single season sack leader, and maybe about how many it was?
I think didn't Reggie White have like 17, 18 in his junior season?
I have Reggie White collecting 15 in 1983. Okay. So I believe that's where it is. I believe there's a chance that if we were having this podcast exactly 1 year from today, it could be a new name at the top of that list. James Pearce Jr. is a phenom for Tennessee, and he's a guy that we really weren't talking about a year ago at this time. No. I know that defenses are going to be a lot more tuned into what he can do. I understand that he's going to get a lot more attention like he was getting in that last stretch of games last year. But I think that he's one of those transformational players that can get through that can still be able to pick up his own stats and his own production, even through having more attention to come his way. I do think that James Pearce Jr. is a top 3 NFL draft pick next year. I think that's a little bold, but definitely my bold prediction is that he eclipses the 15 sacks. Maybe it's just by a little bit, maybe 15.5. 16 is a crazy number to get to. It pretty much require one more per game throughout the course of the season. But if there's anybody who can do it that I've seen since a Derek Barnett, who was the other one to challenge that statistic, I believe his highest for a season was 13.5. Yep. I think it's James Pearce Jr. So I'm really high on what he can do. Again, I understand that he's going to draw a lot more attention from opposing teams. I understand that they're going to be game planning him, but I think that he's just a freak of nature. If he really is going to be a top 3 NFL draft pick this year, I think that is a statistic that he can compete for. And so I'm going to kind of lock that as my last bold prediction, that James Pearce Jr. Eclipses is hard to say, but if I don't say eclipses, once again, I'm going to hear it from Ryan. So I'll go with eclipses Reggie White's 1983 15 sacks in a single season.
James Pearce is going to have some huge games to reach this. 3 sack.
Yeah.
He's going to have maybe at least 1 3-sack game, I'd say. I don't know, man. Of course, everyone's talking about James Pearce, and I completely get it, but I don't think that it feels a little astronomical to me. What's the over/under on games?
You asked for bold
this season.
We're going bold predictions
here. I totally respect it.
Bold.
But over/under on Tennessee games played this year, what, 12.5? Literally, They're going to play 12. So 12.5 would be the over-under, I guess.
No, it would be 13.5 because they're going to play a bowl game no matter what.
Oh, yeah, my bad.
Assuming
okay,
the sky doesn't fall.
Yes, 13.5. Good point. Okay,
so he needs a sack in each.
He needs
14.
He needs 14. He needs 14 games is what he needs.
Yeah, and he'd have to average over 1 a game.
Ooh, well, I don't have Tennessee making the playoffs, so again, I'm kind of contradicting. Man, doing the schedule
You're very
prediction last
contradicting
week.
yourself. Then, if they don't make the playoffs, this is not happening.
I know the schedule prediction last week has really
Mr.
thrown a wrench into my bold predictions.
What are we doing?
And I'm the negative guy.
What are we doing?
Well, you stay over there in your negative corner. Yeah, again, like I really thought about the Nico for Heisman. I was on board with it until I thought about my prediction. I was really on board with James Pearce Jr. could, be that upper echelon of Tennessee sack leaders. I only have them playing in I guess 13 games. So I think that, again, if he got a sack in each, it would be 13, including the bowl game. That would mean 2 more throughout the season to tie the record. It's a lot to ask for. But again, I'm more so just going from the fact that James Pearce Jr. is one of the most just freaky players that I think I've seen live and close in person. And I've not been around a top 3 NFL draft pick like that. I think he has the making of it. So if he's going to be the player that I think he has the potential to be, I think he's in store for a big season. But you're right; they might need a game or 2 more for him to get that far.
Well, Rick, in your defense, that is kind of one of the problems with bold predictions is that it's hard to do. Like you kind of can only do positive bold predictions.
Yeah.
Because you're not just going to say like the team's going to be way worse than you think they are. And then you kind of don't want to crap on like individual players because that's kind of it's a little borderline of a thing to do.
Sacrilege.
Yeah. It's one thing if it's like they're playing poorly, then you talk negatively about them. It's another thing to be like, this guy's going to suck.
Yeah, he's a bust.
Especially preseason. Preseason.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't before the season starts. We don't know. We don't know what they're going to look like.
Again, it's like when the season starts. If someone's playing poorly, you're going to cut it straight and talk about it. But it's a little bit of a different level. Be like, this guy's going to freaking suck. He can't play a lick. But one thing on James Pearce, and we've talked about it on this podcast a little bit last year about earlier in camp about how close to the vest Josh Heupel and Tennessee played James Pearce last year, like in preseason camp, how they didn't talk about him. And earlier this week, because we'll get our first official depth chart on Monday. At least in the past, we've gotten it on Monday game week, so I'm assuming that'll be the same thing this year. And earlier this week, I did an article where I was predicting what Tennessee's depth chart will look like. And so this is my final with the predictions, I went through and did, the oars, like starter at running back's going to be. Or starter at one of the receivers spots is Chris Brazell or Dante Thornton. And I wanted to see how many oars Tennessee had on there last year to have like a general feel for how many oars I should predict. It was 20
enough
of them.
For a rowing competition.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. But what I found really funny, so I went back and found their first depth chart of last year. But what I found really funny about it is James Pearce is listed as the backup. To Roman Harrison at Leo. Not even listed as the starter.
Yeah.
Was it Roman or Joseph's?
No, it was Roman Harrison 1, James Pearce 2, and then Josh Josephs or Caleb Herring is the third string.
That was kind of our first
indication
he
was full backup.
Josh Josephs.
Yeah,
well, and even following up on that though, against my point, I think is that Tennessee has some dogs back there. At least from what we believe, from what we've seen and what we've been told, Tennessee's got a James Pearce Jr. who projects as a top 3 draft pick. But behind him, they've got Joshua Josephs, right? Who, from what we've heard this season, he's been kind of one of these players who has taken the next step. Then you've got Caleb Herring, and we're not even mentioning the 5-star freshman Jordan Ross, who we've just again heard as a freak of nature. So maybe their rotations get a little bit quick because they feel so good about putting fresh talent on that, on the end of that line, being able to be productive despite those changes. So maybe that's the thing that could go against me as well. It's just that Tennessee has playable depth right there, but we don't know what it's going to look like. But again, I guess my theory is pretty much just built upon the idea of James Pearce Jr. is a superhuman, and I think he could record a sack in each game. Maybe there's a couple more where he can get an extra or 2. He can take advantage of a bad tackle or something. So certainly more bold than Tennessee will be back to a tempo offense But one I do believe is in the realm of possibilities, and I'll stand by it.
He has unbelievable twitch. There's no denying. But I just think with the attention he's going to get, like you said, the plethora of options Tennessee has to get after the quarterback, I almost think it's more likely that he doesn't lead the team in sacks than he gets 16. And maybe I'm crazy.
I think that's crazy.
16 it's bold number, and I respect it, like I said, but that's still, he had 10 last year.
I think he had 9.5 last year. And I almost
think the website says 10. So
okay, but ESPN says 9.5. So differently.
Tennessee's boosting.
And maybe this is a no duh, given I just said he had 9.5 last year. But I do think it's more likely to me that he doesn't get double-digit sacks than he gets 16. Yeah, but like also to Rick, I almost think your point you just made is like backs up that argument, because I think those guys, ideally for James Pearce's sack numbers, a guy or two at that position just step up and have big years too, and they just can't, and teams just can't completely shade towards him and completely protect, do everything to protect whoever's blocking him. And I think it's to the point where James Pearce is so good that rotation, he's just still going to be on the field a ton. Like, I just don't like, there's always going to be some more sort of rotation on the defensive line. That's just not a position where you can play every snap in a game. But I think James Pearce is so good that even what they have around him, it's just hard for me to think that he's not going to still be on the field a ton of snaps every game. So
fair.
I definitely see why that point could be a negative, but I think it's a weird mixture to where it's almost, for his sack numbers, could be a good thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Jack,
bold prediction time for me. Yeah. Hendon Hooker threw 27 touchdowns in 2022. Ran for a lot, and Jabari Small was an absolute touchdown merchant that year.
He was.
But, so I think Hendon Hooker's 27 is lower than his impact, if that makes sense. Like, it felt like Hendon Hooker should have had more passing touchdowns. I'll say Nico not only beat...
He also only played 11 games.
True. I say Nico not only beats that, but he beats it by at least 5. I think Nico has 32 or more passing touchdowns, because I feel like this offense will have to rely on him so much. And I like the pass catching capabilities of Tennessee's running backs. It gives them a lot more freedom to do stuff like that in the red zone. Cam Seldon, obviously, basically a receiver. Dylan Sampson has shown the ability to catch passes at a high level. We saw them incorporate that more last year anyway, with Sampson and Wright sometimes too. And I think Sampson and Seldon are better pass catchers than Jalen Wright. So Nico Iamaleava, 32 or more passing touchdowns. Bold prediction. Is it bold enough?
Yeah, I think it's bold enough. Hendon threw 29 and 21. Is that right? Yeah, that pulled
up. Hendon Hooker threw 27 and 22.
Right.
Is that what you just asked?
No, he asked for 21.
Oh. Don't know.
Stand by.
I think it was 29.
Maybe so while y'all are looking that up, just for fun, 32 touchdowns. If Nico was to get 32 on the dot, that would put him as the third highest passing touchdowns in a single season in Tennessee football history. He would only trail Peyton Manning with 36 in 97, and then Tyler Bray with 34 in 2012. He would have one more than Eric Ainge had in 2007. And actually, Hendon Hooker had 31. I'm sure y'all are about to get there, but I'm seeing it now.
Okay,
Hendon Hooker had 31 in 2021. So
let me make
a bold prediction that would put him in the upper echelon of Tennessee quarterbacks history.
Small alteration here. 32 in the regular season.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's definitely bold.
Bang.
Because it would have been, Hendon would have been 31 and
he had
about 12 games. Yeah. That was one of the things that I remember was one of the moments, and obviously that whole year you've thought about how much better Tennessee's offense was. But that Purdue game was one of those games where it's like, wow, this offense is just so much different, because I remember Hendon threw for like 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I remember leaving that game being like, one of Hendon's worst games all year. He missed a lot. He threw like 400 yards.
It was spoiling.
Wow. Yeah.
More than I knew it was quite a bit.
Crazy.
But 5. I mean, both teams scored in the 40s. So, but yeah, so he had 26 that regular season. So that would be 6 more than Hendon's 21 regular season.
Yeah. And
so
5 more.
Honestly, it was about the same, Ryan, because in 10 and a half games in 22, Hendon had 27. And in 10 and a half games
it's really the same. It's 10 and
21. He had 26.
Yeah.
It was.
He came in at the end of the first quarter of that Pitt game, and he got hurt early in the fourth quarter. against South Carolina. Yeah. No, I think the thing here is and kind of goes back to our original conversation to start this thing off about Nico, is the rushing touchdowns. Like, I think he'll have 35 total touchdowns or something. How many of them, how much they used his legs,
right?
Especially in the red zone. I just don't think they're going to use his legs a ton overall because of his frame and
that's my thought.
The backup quarterback situation. But I don't know. That's what I really liked about how they used Hendon in 22. It was like most games they weren't really going to use his legs, but then against Alabama, against Georgia, against Florida, the games they felt like they needed to, they did it in the game plan. I can see them doing some of that. But I think they could even be a little more conservative and not push it until more in the middle of the season.
Hendon's also just a better natural rusher than Nico, I think.
Yeah.
Wouldn't y'all say? For sure.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, what was your first prediction?
Top 5 offense in college football.
That's right. Okay.
As I said, both of mine kind of went hand in hand.
Yeah.
Ryan, you had Ethan Davis. Yeah, let's do a little recap. Ryan had Ethan Davis.
Okay, I have my rankings of our bold predictions. What I think, I'm doing this on the fly. Yes, what I think is most likely to least likely.
No, give us most bold. I guess that goes. This is the opposite.
It's okay. Yeah.
Rank them most bold to least bold.
Well, I'm going least bold to most bold, so you can have a build.
Rick said, "Screw your idea."
Well, I've been really locked in on this the last couple of minutes, trying to remember what everyone's predictions have been. It gets a little confusing. Least bold, tempo. Then number 2, I have Ethan Davis. Number 3, I have the top 5 offense. Number 4, I have the defensive backs with, what'd you say, 15 interceptions?
15 interceptions.
Then number 5, I have Nico with the 32 touchdowns. And then number 6, that'd be a problem. And then number 6, I have James Pearce becoming Tennessee's new all-time sack leader.
I'll say Ethan Davis scoring the second most touchdowns on the team, bolder than 15 picks, 15 interceptions.
Okay.
What do you think, Ryan? Which one of yours is bolder?
I think the interceptions is bolder. Because going back and looking, I still feel like the Ethan Davis one is bold, but when I go back and look at the stats last year and their second and third receiving touchdown guys for both tight ends, it feels a little bit less bold. Though again, I think that's a lot about their lack of playability.
Yes. Yeah.
And they were hurt.
Quarterback-receiver connection was just off so much.
Yeah.
And it's going to be vastly better this year, I think.
Ramel Keaton might have dropped more touchdowns than either of the tight ends had last year.
Oh, yeah. Between Joe Milton overthrows and Ramel Keaton drops.
Yeah.
That was a big swing in the A&M game. Their first touchdown was Ramel Keaton. I mean, one of the moments you just truly felt bad for Josh Heupel. I think it was a 3rd and 1 at like the 35-yard line, and he schemed one up beautifully. No one was in 25 yards of Ramel Keaton, and he dropped a touchdown. That drive, they did get it on 4th down, and Jacob Warren ended up catching a touchdown.
Good memory.
So that was tough for the sequence there.
And circles back to the tight end touchdown. This is a great opportunity to look at our YouTube audience and say, what do you think, right? Leave us a comment below. Who's got, what are the most bold predictions that you've heard so far today? You've gotten 6 of them. Which one is the least bold prediction? I would imagine that the James Pearce Jr. and the Nico touchdowns are going to lead the bold.
I think my list would basically go you and I having the top 2 boldest with Pearce and Nico. Ryan's 2 are in the middle, and then top 5 offense and whatever your non-bold one was, the other one.
Yeah, so Ryan had a really good average.
Last 2.
While Jack and I went for a softball and just a total strike at the end. That's near impossible to reach. So.
And Ryan's were very deep. Like Ryan's were very in the weeds a little bit, which is great since he's the nerd of the group, I think. So
but again, I want to hear what the people think.
Yeah, no, Rick's is funny because it's definitely the most bold and the least bold. I don't know if either of y'all are new girl fans have seen New Girl or got any listeners out there, but it's like Winston, who his pranks are either way too serious or not deep enough,
or they're nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys want to get into exciting and pumping the brakes about this team now, or do you want to save it till next week?
I'd say we do it now. Maybe
let's do it now.
Quick hitters.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll start. Look, I never start. I'll start this time. One thing that excites me about this team, and Ryan hit on it a little bit with his interception prediction, I think the corners could be very, very good with Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson, and it could be completely new for this Tennessee defense to have two really stout corners contending for like third team All SEC, maybe. Not first team All SEC guys, but certainly very, very solid corners for Tennessee to have this year with Jermon McCoy, who I think is maybe more likely than Ricky Gibson, but I think Ricky Gibson has a ton of upside as well. And my worry, which a little bit of contradicting what I've talked about so far this podcast, but I've always talked about this position group as the ultimate swing group as far as could be really good, could be really bad. And that's the wide receivers. I do have a slight worry that there's no one that's going to step up, that they're all going to be about the same, and that is going to hurt the upside of this offense, and it's going to make Nico's life more difficult because he's not going to have one guy to lean on. He's just kind of going to have to be the entire offense, whether it's Brew McCoy not quite being what he was in 22 because of the devastating ankle injury he sustained last year. It's Dante Thornton not being able to take a step, which I'm very hopeful for in that case. It's Chris Brazell, not being that guy that maybe people hope he can be. Obviously, the Tulane transfer there. And then Squirrel White, I don't know if he really... I think we kind of know what Squirrel White is at this point, is what I'm trying to say. So those four guys, no one stepping up is a slight worry I have with this offense. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. And to keep a very brief note, the Squirrel White thing, I don't think his ceiling's super high. I still think there's another gear to his game. Like, I thought he was almost, and granted, probably because Tennessee's receivers weren't very good last year, but I thought he was like Tennessee's best third down, intermediate. When things got off script, he had some really good plays last year, and I think we're going to see that a ton more with Nico. So while I don't know if he can be a true number one, I do think there could maybe be a little bit more to his game. Most excited, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what you said, Jack, a little bit, sophomore defenders. There's a lot of sophomore defenders on this team that I'm intrigued by. Davion Hobbs, Arian Carter, Jeremiah
Rick has got his face in his hand.
Ricky
looks
Gibson.
Like something got stolen.
That would be a crazy one for us both to have, because I feel like that was really specific. Jermon
No,
McCoy.
I really thought I was onto something there.
Those are 5 true
because it's a good point
for Tennessee that I think are going to have. I'm just really intrigued by. I don't know if all of them are going to be great, but I think a handful of those guys, like when you look at Tennessee's defense right now, besides James Pearce, there's not like one guy you're like, oh yeah, they're probably going to be an All SEC defender. My guess is a couple of those guys will at least pop up as fringe All SEC defenders, and at least one, if not multiple, will be All SEC guys. So those guys I all think are really talented, and this is the year where we're first going to see them like in a ton of action. So that's what I'll go with. Worries me, I'll go with the offensive line being able to stay healthy. Not just that they, like, what happens if they don't stay healthy, but I just really worried they're not going to. Like, Cooper Mays has been injured a lot. John Campbell's been injured a lot. Lance Hurd's been banged up in fall camp. And it seems like he hasn't really been full go much at this point. So I just feel like they're going to have injuries there, and what the offensive line looks like if they do have injuries. Left guard, almost all those guys I have injury concerns with, though. To me, there's so many options. It's not that big of a deal. Really, Javonte Spraggins is the one guy in the offensive line. I'm like, yeah, they've been really reliable and have been out on the field basically every game for the last few years.
But even he got hurt to end the season last year.
He did get hurt to end the season, yeah. But that was like a serious injury. That wasn't like all right, he's just banged up, he can't play. So
yeah,
I worry about what the offensive line looks like if injuries happen, and I feel like injuries probably are going to happen just based on the history of those guys.
Real quick, before Rick gives his, Ryan, rank them in terms of importance of staying healthy. I feel like Cooper's one who would do the 4, the 2 tackles, Javonte Spraggins and Cooper Mays.
Yeah, I'll go Cooper 1, Lance Hurd 2, Campbell 3.
Okay, Campbell 3. Spraggins 4.
And then the guards. Yeah, I mean, just
because guard depth. Yeah. Just
because and it's an easier position to play. Like, for the most part, you can kind of get away with your guards being fine.
Yeah, but Dane Davis could, like, if John Campbell got hurt and you go to Dane Davis, is it that big of a downgrade?
I don't know if it's that big of a downgrade. I think you're just on an island so much more in offensive tackle where it could become a lot more evident, at least against the elite teams Tennessee plays.
Okay, so Ryan mentioned the sophomore defensive players, which, again, I think is a really good idea. I'm sure you had that idea and you're like, wow, I'm really going to get one over on the guys here today. It's not like I had that thought or anything. But I'm actually still going to stay in that direction. You talked about it in a little bit of a Broadway. I think that Arian Carter is going to be a household name by the end of the season. He to me is such just ridiculous breakout potential. I think he's a really talented player with what he can do on the field, but I also think he gets it. You know, I still go back to one of my biggest takeaways from just media sessions over the course of fall camp has been the stories about what Arian Carter is doing to prepare himself for that next level. And not that he's the only one, but he's the guy that William Inge says, man, I got to go call him at 12:30 at night to say, hey, is your car broken down? Is something going on? Are you off campus? You know, why is your car still here? And Arian Carter is the one who responds, I'm just in the film room, coach. He talked about how he didn't just want to be in the film room, but he wanted to understand it at a deeper level. Reminds me of a guy like Peyton Manning. I think Arian Carter is that guy who brings in his teammates and says, hey, look, if this is my position as the linebacker, what are you doing here as the safety, right? What are you doing here as the nose tackle so that I can get a better understanding of where I need to be or where the gaps in the coverage might be? So I think he's just a phenomenal player and will really get a chance to prove it this year. Had the season-ending injury last year. So I've just been extremely impressed by what I've seen and from what we've heard from Arian Carter. I think that he's not only a household name by the end of the year, but I think that he is maybe even the face of Tennessee's defense moving forward just because he is such a productive guy. He was also who am I missing? Moving forward. You got a top 5 draft pick there right now, but I think he's kind of that face of the defense moving forward, the guy that people knows has his stuff together in the middle of the field. As far as things
he's the guy in that group of sophomores I have the most confidence in. So I like it.
Yeah, I would say too. Good thing we're not doing bold predictions here because that would not have been bold.
Jack?
I was just saying, like, even last year, of those sophomores, Arian Carter's the most highly touted. Like, he's the best prospect.
He was the most highly touted. I'm not sure. To me, his play last year was a tad disappointing.
Right, but even going into last year, like, we were all excited about Arian Carter.
Yes. You knew that eventually he was going to turn into something.
Yeah. Whereas T-Lander was a bit of a surprise. Like, it was like, Cameron T-Lander is actually a contributor. Wow, you know.
And T-Lander, I'm still high on as well. As far as also one other thing that I do want to say that's just been positive is that I went into fall camp just kind of having no idea what Tennessee's running back room was going to look like behind Dylan Sampson. And now we're sitting here 22 days later and I'm like, wow, like what is this rotation going to look like? Because I feel like all of them have been making an impact in fall camp so far. And they've certainly had the opportunity to do so with people in that room banged up. I wonder just, what have those opportunities done to Peyton Lewis? I know he's just a freshman. He might be on the back end of the pecking order, but it still feels like he's got some dynamic abilities to his game. Can they get him on the field in any kind of way? Just what is that rotation going to look like? It's better than I thought it was going to be a month ago. If you talk about a area for concern, I believe that it's going to be quality. I believe that it's going to be sustainable, but I wonder about how this Tennessee secondary and really just the safeties in particular. I wonder if they're going to have it in their system to play the caliber of, hey, Tennessee can only afford, let's say this one or, these 2 losses to get into the playoffs. Can that safety position, elevate their own game to that spot as well? I don't know. I know the coaching staff's got a lot of faith and belief in a guy like Will Brooks. Can he, be sustainable for an entire season? Andre Turntine going to have an opportunity. And then Star, I think, is a position that we've all said, well, I have to wait and see, right? Is it going to be Christian Harrison? Is it going to be Boo Carter? There's some athleticism there, but it's all raw. It's all unproven. It's all potential. So I think that's still probably the position group that I have the most questions about, that maybe the most concern about heading into the season, but we'll see how they do. And I agree with you guys in the idea that not only do they have really talented cornerbacks that I think are going to make life a little bit difficult for the receivers getting off the line right there. But they've also got a nasty pass rush that's not going to allow quarterbacks to sit back in the pocket for 4 seconds, 5 full seconds to get off that pass. So I think they'll have some advantages around them, a little bit of help. But if you're asking me where I still have a little bit of hesitation, maybe still some more questions, it's probably with the 3 safeties.
There you have it. Good pod today, boys. Covered a lot of ground. Bold predictions are so fun, by the way. Like, the concept of bold predictions are always the best. And thank you, Rick, for writing them down. We'll have to revisit those, see who's right. When James Pearce has 8 sacks, I'm definitely going to clown you, but it'll be all right. But when Nico has 22 touchdowns, you can clown me. So,
I'm gonna say we have a lot of evidence, but also, hey, we don't do that to each other. We got people who are gonna roast us for us, right? We are singing Kumbaya here on this wonderful Thursday afternoon.
Speaking of clowning, something Ryan,
I'm just trying not to get roasted here.
Yeah, well, you always leave yourself open to that when we talk about the WWE to Ryan, of course, but it's a weekly special at this point. It's routine. Rick, you've guessed Shawn Michaels, Mick Foley, and Rey Mysterio so far, right? Those 3 on my setup here of 16 wrestlers. Who are you going with this week?
I'm going to say the Stinger is in the corner by your head.
Oh, he got one wrong. Oh, he got one wrong.
Oh, no.
No.
That's not the Stinger.
Rick, Sting didn't even wrestle in WWE. Like,
I don't know
in itself.
I don't know your requirements for being up on the wall. You could have some WCW guys.
I've told you before, these are guys I grew up watching, and I'm 22. Like, I grew up watching WWE 07 to 2011. Oh,
dadgum, it's Jeff Hardy, isn't it?
Oh. Yes, there you go. At least you got to it. I'll give you half.
I'm proud of you, Rick. I'm proud that you got one wrong.
Shut up.
No, I am. It's a good sign that you don't know all the wrestlers.
That's great. Okay. Well, let's get out of here.
Rick can't take it anymore now that you got one wrong.
Dang.
Yeah, it's a tough scene. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the RTI Insider Press Pass. Appreciate you guys watching and listening. If you've listened to the RTI Press Pass for a couple years now, we do have the video component, which we've mentioned quite a bit now. Go over to the RTI Insider YouTube to watch all of that. Can also follow along with all fall camp coverage. Preseason basketball is going to be here before we know it here in a couple months. Of course, season starts in October. So Ryan and Rick will have you covered there as well over at RockyTopInsider.com. If you want to follow Ryan, you can do that at rshump00 on X. That's SCHUMP. Rick Butler's at Ric Butler on social media as well. And I'm at Jack Foster Media. Until next time, when we're doing a little bit of a chat preview along with some other things, we'll only be like a couple of days away from the season opener next week. But until then, we'll see you next time, and peace.
Are you sure that's not Sting?